With a history of almost a century, Target is one of the biggest and oldest retail chains in the US. At its peak, it operated more than 2,000 stores, employed over 400,000 people, and generated tens of billions of dollars in revenue every year. People loved it so much they even gave it a nickname, Target, as if it were some luxury French fashion brand. And for a while, that reputation seemed justified. Because in 2021, while every company was struggling due to the pandemic, Target's market value surged to nearly $120 billion. Through sharp positioning, stylish products, and iconic brand collaborations, Target became one of the strongest retail brands in the US. But within just a few years, Target destroyed all of that. So, what happened to Target? And how did one of America's most loved retailers fall this hard? Target's story began in 1902 when George Draper Dayton acquired a small dry goods store in Minneapolis. The business quickly earned a reputation for quality merchandise and fair treatment of customers. Over the following decades, it expanded across the Midwest, eventually becoming the Dayton Company. But it took almost 6 decades before the company opened its first Target stores in Roseville, Minnesota. And that's where the story really begins. By the late 1990s, Target started to understand something most retailers were missing. Customers did not just want low prices. They wanted products that felt stylish and well-designed but without the luxury price tags. That realization became Target's strategy that came to be known as Cheap Chic. At this point, Robert Ulrich was leading the company. He started his career as a merchandising trainee and later became CEO of Dayton Hudson Corporation. In 1994, under Ulrich, Target leaned into its Cheap Chic identity by partnering with high-profile designers like Michael Graves. Graves was already famous for turning everyday objects into design statements. His Alessi 9093 kettle, priced around $100 at the time, had become a status symbol for wealthy young urban professionals. But for Target, Graves designed a tea kettle priced at around $40. It was not exactly cheap, but it gave everyday shoppers a taste of luxury at a price they could actually reach. And they loved it. The kettle became a huge success. It was so iconic that it later became part of the collection at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. And that was just the beginning. By the 2000s, Target began doubling down on this idea. It partnered with fashion designers like Isaac Mizrahi and Proenza Schouler, turning designer names into affordable mass-market products. But the most iconic moment came in 2011, with Target's limited edition Missoni collection.
Frenzied shoppers battling it out, trying to get designer duds for low prices. And now Target is the latest to join the craze with their new Missoni for Target collection.
The Italian fashion house brought its bold colors and famous zigzag patterns to more than 400 products. The launch was so massive that it crashed Target's website multiple times. Over the next 2 decades, Target pushed this idea massively, partnering with more than 175 designers and turning an affordable style into the center of its brand. And it worked. Under Ulrich, Target grew at an incredible pace. By 2005, Forbes named Target the most philanthropic company in America. The company expanded from 611 stores to 1,682 stores, nearly tripling in just 14 years. Fundamentally, Target had cracked the code. It sold discounted products that still made customers feel wealthy. But that strategy was incredibly difficult to maintain because Target had to be cheap and cool at the same time. For years, Target managed that balance perfectly. But everything began to shift when Robert Ulrich retired in 2008. And ironically, one of his greatest achievements would become the very weakness that started breaking Target from the inside. Following Robert Ulrich's retirement in 2008, Greg Steinhoffel took charge of Target. He was not an outsider. Greg was a Target veteran with nearly 3 decades of experience, and his first major move was to refurbish Target's loyalty program, the Target Guest Card. Target launched the Guest Card back in 1995, making it one of the first major store-branded cards from a discount retailer. Under Greg, the Guest Card evolved into the Target Red Card program. The card's real hook was the 5% discount on nearly every purchase. Target made that discount work by pushing the debit version of the Red Card. Since customers linked it to their existing bank account, Target was able to pull money directly from the account and reduce the processing fees that usually come with traditional card transactions. The strategy was a huge success. In 2012, customers who started using Red Cards spent about 50% more. And in the same quarter, roughly 14% of the retailer's sales came from Red Card purchases. But that same trust would soon become one of Target's biggest weaknesses. In December 2013, right in the middle of the holiday shopping season, Target executives received the kind of news every retailer fears. The company had been hacked. Starting in late November, hackers stole data from millions of credit and debit card accounts. As a result, personal information from roughly 70 million customers was exposed. The breach began through a third-party vendor with legitimate access to Target's network. But the most shocking part was that Target was not a small company with weak security. It had a security team of more than 300 employees and had recently invested in FireEye, one of the most respected cybersecurity tools at the time. FireEye detected the malware and alerts were forwarded to Target's operations team, but no action was taken. Even worse, FireEye had a feature that could automatically remove malware. Target had turned that feature off because it wanted humans to decide what should and should not be removed. This was a massive blow for Target because it happened during the holiday season, when retailers generate a major share of their annual sales. After the breach became public, Target saw a sharp drop in holiday transactions. To win shoppers back, the company offered a 10% discount across its U.S. stores just before Christmas. But the damage was already done. Customer trust took a major hit, and Target's holiday quarter profit fell by a brutal 46%. Moreover, Target had to pay $18.5 million in retribution for the damages. The issue was so massive that the board was forced to act. But by the time Greg resigned, Target's next disaster was already in motion. In 2011, Greg Steinhoffel made Target's first major move outside the United States, and their choice of expansion was the Canadian market. Since Canadians already knew Target from cross-border shopping trips, the company believed it could quickly bring its Cheap Chic formula into the Canadian market. So they went in aggressively and spent $1.8 billion to buy the lease rights to more than 200 Zellers locations, a struggling Canadian retail chain. On paper, it looked like the perfect shortcut. Target believed it could take these old stores, put its brand on them, and build a multi-billion-dollar business almost overnight. The projections were massive. Target expected Canada to become a $6 billion revenue opportunity by 2017. But there was a problem. Target was not a high-margin business. To make that kind of money, everything had to work perfectly. The supply chain, the inventory system, the store locations, like every piece had to move smoothly. But Target did not have that infrastructure ready. There was a reason Zellers was struggling. Many of its locations were weak, outdated, and poorly positioned. But Target assumed its brand was strong enough to fix that. But the result was a disaster. Stores opened with empty shelves, prices were higher than Canadian shoppers expected, inventory systems were messy, and the Target experience people imagined from the US simply was not there. All of this made Target lose money on almost every transaction. And within 2 years, the dream was over. The loss was massive as more than 17,000 people lost their jobs, and Target walked away with $7 billion in losses. What was supposed to be Target's first great international expansion became one of the biggest retail failures in Canadian history. For decades, Target's biggest management problem was that it rarely brought in outsiders. Its leaders were usually homegrown executives who had spent decades inside the company. But after the data breach and the collapse of the Canada expansion, the board needed someone who was not tied to the decisions that created the mess. They needed someone who could rebuild customer trust, fix operations, and reset Target's strategy. So they hired Brian Cornell in 2014, the first outsider CEO in Target's history. Cornell had experience at PepsiCo, Sam's Club, Michaels, and Safeway, so he brought both retail and consumer brand experience. But Cornell's moves will eventually destroy the whole identity of the company. Cornell was good at understanding what worked at Target. Instead of chasing aggressive growth, he renovated stores, increased merchandising, and focused on stronger brand partnerships. As part of this push, Target acquired Shipt in 2017 for $550 million, which was one of the largest acquisitions in Target's history. And the acquisition paid off almost immediately. By 2018, Target had rapidly expanded its same-day delivery network, bringing the service to hundreds of markets, and the momentum continued when the pandemic hit in 2020. Since the customers were shifting online at a massive speed, Target already had the infrastructure to meet that demand. Digital sales tripled, revenue surged by around $15 billion in a single year, and Target's stock climbed from around $60 to nearly $260. Within 3 years, Shipt became Target's smartest strategic move. But soon, everything changed when one of the most consequential events in modern American history happened in Target's own backyard. In 2020, George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, the same city where Target is headquartered. In response to the movement that followed, CEO Brian Cornell launched racial equity programs, created the REACH initiative, and pledged to spend more than $2 billion with Black-owned businesses by the end of 2025. All of this helped the company with more younger and diverse shoppers, but it also made Target a major target in America's culture war. In 2023, Target launched its Pride collection, as it had done for years. But this time, the backlash exploded. Conservative activists attacked the collection online, especially around transgender-related items. As the outrage grew, the company removed some Pride items and adjusted displays, saying it was doing so to protect workers. But that was a major mistake. Conservatives were already angry because Target sold Pride products. But when Target pulled some of the products, progressives and LGBTQ supporters got angry because it looked like Target had folded under pressure. So, in the end, Target ended up pleasing nobody. Then came the bigger DEI blowback. In January 2025, Target announced that they would conclude its 3-year DEI goals and end its REACH initiatives. This landed badly since many Black customers and activists thought that Target had used George Floyd's death to build goodwill, and then backed away when Trump came into power. All of this had a huge impact on Target. Within months, their stock was down about 33% for the year, trading just above $91. This was a brutal fall from its pandemic-era peak of around $260. At the same time, Target was being hit by the higher import taxes under President Donald Trump's tariff policy. Compared to Walmart, who makes most of its money from everyday essentials, Target depends far more on categories like home goods, apparel, and private label products. And since 30% of Target's store label goods were still sourced from China, many of those products were vulnerable to tariff pressure. This higher cost and weaker demand compressed Target's profitability margins. And by February 2026, that pressure finally led to another leadership change. CEO Brian Cornell was replaced by COO Michael Fidelki. And within months, he launched a $5 billion turnaround plan aimed at reversing years of declining sales. The plan included $2 billion for store renovations, along with increased staffing, higher employee pay, and improvements across the overall shopping experience. With these changes, Target is slowly trying to climb back toward its better days. But despite those efforts, the company remains far from its peak. During the pandemic boom, Target's market value briefly exceeded $120 billion. Today, it stands at roughly $55 to $60 billion, about half of what it once was.